Εφημερίδα Μακεδονία 1912. Και ο προκάτοχος του Φερδινάντου, ο ηγεμόν Αλέξανδρος Βάτεμπεργκ, είχε σημητικό νέμα. Οι Βάτεμπεργκ κατάγονται το οντί από την Πολωνίδα Εβραίαν Χάουκε, νυμφευθήσαν το 1851 τον πρίγκιπα Αλέξανδρον της Έσης, και ιός αυτής ήτο ο Αλέξανδρος της Βουλγαρίας. Εκ του οίκου αυτού, εγγονή της Εβραίας Χάουκε, είναι η Βικτόρια Βάτεμπεργκ, νυμφευθήσα το βασιλέα Αλφόνσο και μέλουσα να δώσει αυτή εβραϊκό νέμα στον καθολικότατον οίκο της Ισπανίας. Εγγονή επίσης της Χάουκε, θυγατήρ του πρίγκιπος Λουδοβίκου, είναι η πριγκίπισσα Αλίκη της Ελλάδος.
Really nice
Very good to see you. It's
Yes.
been a long time.
Long time.
Been a long
Yes.
time.
Yes.
Well, it's very pleasant to be here to
Yes.
learn this extraordinary story about Princess Alice.
Well, absolutely. And of course, you see, for the last 2 years of her life, she lived in those windows just to the right of the central window where the balcony is, where they come out chipping the colour. And if you'd driven past in the evening, you'd have seen the lights glowing from those windows from 1967 till her death in December 69, where she was taken in by Prince Philip and the Queen. And they were a bit worried about what to do with her in Greece, and they knew there was political trouble. And so her daughter went to see her and said, the Queen would like you to come and live at Buckingham Palace. And she said, Lilibet wants me to come. Well, we go this afternoon. I said, well, no, you have to wait until the King's plane is going across. But then she came to live here, and she died here. And then, of course, you see her funeral took place in Windsor Castle, and she was buried in the vault of St. George's Chapel. And there she remained. And there was a certain sort of, it was rather interesting. Prince Philip said, extraordinary that his mother had been born in Windsor Castle as a great-granddaughter of Queen Victoria, and that after all those troubled life that she had ended up there. But then in 1988, some 19 years later, they managed to get her to Jerusalem and place her in the crypt.
Where she'd always wanted to be.
She wanted to be near her aunt, the Grand Duchess Ella.
Right.
And she very much wanted to be in Jerusalem near her aunt. I mean, her aunt was what one might call her role model,
Yes.
who had created a nursing sisterhood to go out into the world and help people.
Right.
But her aunt was very rich, living in Moscow.
Right.
Princess Alice had no money at all. And she didn't have quite the strength. It was very good-hearted of her. Never really quite worked, to be honest.
Right.
So, but she was happy, I think, here to be near Prince Philip. She was devoted to him, of course. One boy after 4 daughters.
And she was herself a direct descendant of Queen Victoria.
Well, she was a great-granddaughter of Queen Victoria, born in the very presence of the Queen in 1885.
Goodness me.
Queen Victoria was determined to be there, so that's quite a start. But it was very funny, when Prince Philip married Princess Elizabeth, as she then was, people said to him, courtiers were rather nasty to him, they said, we think you'll rather like Windsor Castle when you get to know it. And he said, thank you very much, my mother was born there. So,
Good for him.
Yes. And of course, I mean, as a young girl, she would come to the palace to the rare times when Queen Victoria was in London for those jubilees, particularly the 1897 Jubilee. Princess Alice would be staying here. And she was staying here in 1902 for the coronation of Edward VII. And Queen Alexandra's nephew, Prince Andrew of Greece, was also staying there, and that's how they met.
Oh, right.
They subsequently married.
Right.
So Buckingham Palace played quite a big part in her life, really, one way and another. She also made a very dramatic appearance at the coronation in 1953, dressed in her nun's robes.
Oh.
And of course, with everybody else wearing jewels and orders and decorations, this grey figure, looked quite fantastic.
Right.
Walking alone down the abbey, followed by her family.
Now, you've written her life, so what would you say, from the point of view of our film, was really the most dramatic moment?
Well, I do think the most dramatic moment was the thing which was discovered years after she died, when she hid this Jewish family of Coens, which was extremely brave and something that she never talked about to anyone. I mean, her family didn't know it, and when they were asked, well, why didn't she talk about it, said, well, it's something she would consider something perfectly natural to do.
Right.
As a princess and as a nursing princess.
Right.
She saw her role as helping others in whatever way she could. Soup kitchens, young people, orphans, children, raising money, funds, helping clothes, giving soldiers cigarettes if they needed them, anything like that.
So when these people were in danger, she naturally said, well,
She took them in, and she did it extremely effectively and very well and quietly, never told anybody about it. She just told her staff that this was a Swiss governess who was in a bit of trouble at the moment and needed to stay there. And
so there was no danger of betrayal. The staff merely thought this was a
no,
Swiss
I
person.
imagine there was a certain danger,
Right.
but it didn't happen.
But she protected them from that by
Yes.
not telling anybody.
By not telling anyone. And the advantage she had in a way was that she was extremely deaf. So when occasionally a Gestapo officer came to visit her to perhaps inquire what was going on,
Right.
she just appeared to not understand what he was saying, and they went away thinking she's a silly old woman, probably somebody who couldn't organise anything at all.
How
It was very
extraordinary.
effective.
How did it become known?
Became known because Jack Cohen, who was the son of the Mrs. Cohen and his sister who were hidden there, and he himself was hidden there for a bit, recommended her for a Yad Vashem award. So it was investigated and
So if it
inquired
hadn't
about.
been for one of those rescued, there wouldn't have been a story at all. Wouldn't have become
exactly.
known.
That's right. The most extraordinary thing was, I mean, she died here at Buckingham Palace, December 1969. The funeral was at St George's Chapel, and then she was placed in the royal vault, which George III built under the chapel, and there she remained. And when Michael Mann became Dean of Windsor, he went down into the vault and saw this coffin there, and was told by Lord Chamberlain, well, actually one of your jobs is to bury her, to fulfil her wishes, which are to be buried in the convent on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. And the reason she wanted to be buried there was because she was devoted to her aunt, Ella, who had Grand Duchess Serge of Russia, who had been thrown down a mine shaft in 1918, and whose own coffin had found its way to Peking and then been rescued by the Battenbergs, by Princess Alice's parents, and brought to Jerusalem. And she is now a saint in the Russian Church, and indeed one of the Christian martyrs on Westminster Abbey, interestingly, if you on the front on the doors above Westminster Abbey. So Michael Mann then set about this task, which was pretty difficult because you were talking about I suppose, half British, half German princess with a very prominent British son, who she was probably Greek Orthodox, certainly married to a Greek prince, wishing to be buried in Jerusalem in a Russian church. And somehow they had to come through Jordan as well to make this possible. And so there were all these different problems. And there was a terrible rogue, safely dead, so I can say that, running that church, who was sort of selling off the roof and things, and was causing the most terrible problems. And at one point, unfortunately, during the negotiations, which were going along very well, Prince Philip, I think, and the Queen were on a state visit, if I remember rightly, to Jordan. And as a sort of shabbily dressed figure, he arrived and said he had come to see the Duke of Edinburgh, and he was turned away. He then wrote a letter saying, "Sir, it seems that all these negotiations are something which you don't wish to pursue," and therefore he unwound the whole thing. They had to start all over again. And finally, Michael Mann took the coffin, said to Prince Philip, "I'll take her out. I may have to bring her back again." But they went off, and then they went through all these extraordinary long masses, which went on standing in the morning, and the overnight flight. He came straight off the plane with the coffin, and they went to one of these things. Then they had a big, huge breakfast, and then another mass. And then when they got to the Russian church, all the nuns were chanting, and because there were two sects, and one of them didn't want her there, and so they just waited till they quietened down, and then they took the coffin in, and there it is. And when he went back to his hotel, he realised he'd been on his feet for over 24 hours, and she's still there. And there's always the possibility that the Grand Duchess Ella might be removed back to her convent in Russia. That's what they would like at the convent. Whether this will happen or not, I don't know. So then I don't know what would happen to Princess Alice. Would she stay there? Would she come home again? Would she go with her aunt to Russia? So it's all quite dramatic, really. And the coffin, you've seen the coffin?
Yes.
Yes, and it's under the Greek flag and the Royal Standard, yes, Greek Royal Standard. And Prince Philip's sister was able to go, Princess George of Hanover, on this occasion. And Prince Philip, when he went to accept the Yad Vashem in 1994, was able to go and see his mother's coffin in place. Extraordinary end to the story.
If it is the end.
If it is the end, exactly. She had various difficulties in her life. I mean, the eustachian tubes were blocked, so she was very, very deaf. And this was discovered by Princess Battenberg, the mother of Prince Louis, when she was a young girl in Darmstadt. And she could hear certain rhythms, and she could hear some people's voices, and she could lip read in several languages. Always great fun when she went to a silent movie, because she could tell what they were really saying. And people literally put their hand up like this in the room when she was talking. So she had that disability. She was very beautiful, and I don't think she had an easy time at all being married to Prince Andrew. And then they had the 4 daughters. So always problems in Greece. I mean, the King of Greece he was either there or he wasn't there. One of the kings of Greece said, what you need as king of Greece is a suitcase permanently packed. You never know when you're going to have to leave, and as you know,
they're going to be deposed.
Deposed, absolutely. And in the course of the 20th century, they were there, they were not there, they were back, and now they've of course been out since 1967 or whatever, 66, 67. And so that was always very difficult. So she never had much money, but she believed as a princess that her job was to help other people. And she was devoted to her aunt, the one that she's buried next to, who had formed a nursing sisterhood in Russia. But the difference was that Ella was very rich, Princess Alice wasn't. And also I think Ella was stronger psychologically than Princess Alice. So it was a very well-intentioned idea. She formed this nursing sisterhood in Greece. First of all, she just trained girls, but she realized that she was making like a finishing school, and they just got married. So then she put them into habits, and they looked like nurses. Well, this wasn't also a great success because apparently nurses are very much treated as prostitutes in the eyes of many a Greek man. So not unnaturally, people didn't want their daughters being dressed like this, and the danger that that's what how it might be interpreted. And then Princess Alice would set up one of these sisterhoods, and she had some nurses. But then she would go away in the summer, to visit her daughters in Germany. And when she came back, all the nurses had gone. I mean, so I asked if I could meet some of her sisters, and they said, well, there aren't any. They've all disappeared. So she had very good intentions, but it didn't always work out.
So this was the instinct somehow to do good to
yes.
other people.
And particularly during the war, when most of the Greek royal family had left Athens, only she and her sister-in-law, Princess Nicholas, the mother of Princess Marina, were there. And Princess Nicholas, who was a Russian Grand Duchess, looked down on Princess Alice very much because she was morganatic. And Princess Nicholas's idea was the hierarchy was God first, then the Russian Grand Dukes, and then the rest. And she was forever sitting in a very grand seat going through the Orthodox services and things, but she didn't really do very much for anybody else. And of course, when the German officer arrived in Greece, Princess Nicholas accepted various favours, and so she was quite well looked after, and she did not starve. But when he went to visit Princess Alice and said to her, "What is there anything I can do for you?" First of all, she refused to shake his hand, and secondly, she just turned to him and said, "Yes, you can get out of my country." That's her attitude. So she was not in good favour, and nor was she well fed, and she lost 26 kilos at one point. And meanwhile, she was running a soup kitchen, trying to look after all these small children who got one meal a day and really starving. And the only time she ever left Greece during the war was to raise funds in the help of the Greek Red Cross. And she went to Sweden. Well, she went via Sweden. Her sister was Crown Princess of Sweden, and she was a conduit for letters from the English family to Princess Alice and so forth. And I think she came to London at one point to try and raise funds. I don't know how successful. Then went back, and absolutely as soon as possible. But all her letters from this time, such as survive, all say, "I'm fine, don't worry about me." And this memorable letter in which she says there's really nothing very much going on, which was the time when she was hiding the Coen family. There was a lot going on.
Very remarkable woman.
Very remarkable, yes. And very much an unsung heroine, which is as she would have wanted it. I mean, she never wanted any glory for herself.
And never spoke about it.
And never spoke about it. And when she died, I mean, all that was left of her possessions were, I think, 2 dressing gowns, or if there were 3 nurses, there were 3 dressing gowns, and Princess Sophie gave each nurse a dressing gown. Well, she destroyed all her letters and papers and never kept anything at all. There was nothing left. Gave everything away.
So we're very fortunate in a way that those whom she saved were determined to have
Yes,
a recognition.
absolutely. Well, this is the library, and I think you'll feel somewhat at home here because I have not a complete but considerable collection of your books, along with Sir Winston's, quite a big sort of Churchill shelf, along with some various other political books.
Where are your own books?
Well, my own books are around the corner.
Around the corner.
One or two of them over there in leather editions, which publishers used to kindly do at certain points. But I always like to have one thing in connection with the subject I've written about, and I'm very lucky to have this picture of Princess Alice, which was taken in the Edward VII Hospital in 1967 when she first came to London. And my reading is that they thought that she was really quite ill and that she might die, and they wanted a picture of her. So they sent a photographer, Godfrey Argent, along, and he told me that she hopped out of bed in her dressing gown, sat in the chair, and he ran off a couple of contact sheets and never spoke to him. But then, well, I suppose she said goodbye to him probably, but that was about it. And then got back into bed again, and off he went. And it's rather a nice picture, I think, and it's rare because you see something of her personality. I mean, I know you met Lord Mountbatten, who was her brother, and you can perhaps certain Mountbattenish sort of features you can see.
Her character comes through that.
It does
very well. One can picture her defying that German officer.
Yes, I think so. She's a powerful and fragile figure at the same time, in a way. But of course, in those days, most of the time she was always dressed in a nun's habit. She wasn't a real nun. And her mother used to say of her, "What can you say of a nun who smokes and plays canasta?" Which she also did. But she found it more convenient to dress as a nun. It was easy for raising money for charity and that sort of thing.
There's the famous photograph of her at the coronation.
Which is a wonderful picture. And of course, I think she must have known exactly what she was doing. She used to wear normally just an ordinary grey habit, but this time she was said to have gone to Belmont in Paris and had this run-up specially. But this grey figure with no jewels or no ridiculous orders and medals and things on her. Great contrast to all the other sort of rather over-bejeweled or
tiaras,
exactly,
decorations.
Yeah, Ruritanians and the
Well, it's very good to see her here. And,
yes.
We shall explore her haunts in Athens and tell her story in Athens, which really is one of the remarkable stories.
Yes.
And one can see also a person there who wouldn't be boasting about it, who considered it something. It was her, the thing she felt she should do. It was the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
And do it.
Yeah.
As she was doing, helping many other people with her,
Yes.
feeding people and guarding them, protecting them.
She saw that as her role. It was the difference really between the sort of very grand sister-in-law, Princess Nicholas,
Right.
Grand Duchess Helen, who was always sort of attending sort of amazing Orthodox services and things. And Princess Alice her line was, we must be practical, we must go out into the world, which she'd seen her aunt do in Russia.
Right.
We must go out and help people.
The situation in Athens then must have been very desperate with the German occupation, the tyranny of the Gestapo.
Yes, and the Greek royal family had all left, other than Princess Alice, who was determined to stay, and also her sister-in-law, Princess Nicholas, who was the mother of Princess Marina. They didn't get on particularly well, because Princess Nicholas was very grand and Russian, and Princess Alice was morganatic, so she rather looked down on her. And during the early years of the war, she was running a soup kitchen, she was doing her best to feed orphan children, and running around very much as a sort of nurse on the ground. And the only time she left Athens during this time was to try and do a bit of fundraising for the Greek Red Cross. But then, of course, when a lot of the Jewish population came down there and Archbishop Damaskinos was in his palace with the German guards and things, of course, a lot of them were in great trouble. And she knew this family, the Coens. Old Mr. Coen had died recently, but Mrs. Coen remembered that they had housed the Greek royal family at one time in Salonika, and that they'd always said, you know, if ever you need any help, we'll be happy to give it. And Princess Alice got to hear about it. She originally heard about it through a rather social friend, so she just said, no, I'm not interested, I'm not going to get involved in this. But that's because she didn't trust the social friend. And so then she independently made inquiries and found this family, and they met. And an hour later, Mrs. Coen and her daughter were ensconced in the house in Athens where Princess Alice was living. And she told her staff that this was a Swiss governess who was in a certain amount of danger and just was living there for a time. So this would be about, I think, October 1943, and they lived there and through into the following year. And at one point, Jacques Coen also came to join them, and his brothers managed to escape and join free forces elsewhere and so forth. So it was a very brave thing to do, because she would have been in great trouble had she been caught housing this family.
And always, I suppose, the danger of betrayal.
And always the danger of betrayal, which is why she was particularly discreet about it. I mean, she was very discreet anyway, and she was protected to some extent by her deafness. And I think on this occasion, this was also helped because on the occasions when German soldiers came to question her, she just appeared not to understand the question and didn't really hear. She could understand it perfectly well because she could lip read, but they just thought she was a silly old woman and that she couldn't organise anything anyway, and so they left her in peace. And then even after that, after they'd gone and after the war was over and so forth and everything went back to normal, she never spoke about it. Nobody ever knew that she'd done this.
How long had they been in hiding there with her?
They were there for several months, yes. And then, of course, many, many years later, Jacques Coen, the son, as an elderly gentleman living in Paris, wanted to get her the Yad Vashem award. And so he produced the story, and this was a great surprise to everybody. And he produced the evidence and so forth, and the award was duly given in 1994. And Prince Philip and his sister, Princess Sophie of Hanover, went over to Jerusalem to receive the award on behalf of their mother. And they were obviously asked, why didn't she tell you about it? And Prince Philip simply said that it wasn't something that she would ever feel was anything other than totally natural, and therefore no point in mentioning it. And they never asked her.
She acted because she felt that was the right thing to do, and
Yes.
that there was nothing particularly meritorious about it from her perspective.
Well, there was certainly nothing in it for her except danger, but I mean, she felt that it was her duty to help this family that were in distress, and who had incidentally helped a little bit when the Greek royal family needed some help some years before. But I think she would have taken anybody in, actually. She was that sort of person. She felt that the role of a princess, particularly when times were difficult, was to ameliorate the lot of other people. So at a time when it was very difficult in Athens, I mean, she used to, there was a man called Major Gerald Green who was designated to look after her and Princess Nicholas, whom they moved in on rather uncomfortably into the same house. And he used to tick Princess Alice off because she used to go out and give cigarettes to the soldiers. And she was in considerable danger doing this. And she said, no, but that's my job. That's my job. Otherwise, what's the point of being a princess if you can't help people? And that was her philosophy.
And what was her own situation in Athens at the time? Were there considerable privations, even for a princess?
Very much so. Princess Nicholas had, I think, been quite receptive to the approaches of the German officer who went to see her, and so she was never starving, and she was rather comfortably looked after. But when the German officer came to see Princess Alice, he said to her, first of all, she wouldn't shake him by the hand. And he said, is there anything I can do for you? And she looked at him and she said, yes, you can get out of my country. So yes, she was in great privation. She lost 26 kilos at one point. But whenever she wrote to her family, which she did through her sister, Crown Princess Louise in Sweden, which was a neutral country, so she was the conduit for the letters to everybody during that time, all her letters say, I'm fine, don't worry about me, everything's all right. It wasn't all right at all. And at exactly the moment when she was taking Mrs. Cohen and her daughter in, she wrote a letter saying, there's really nothing going on here at all. Well, we know that to be very different. She only left Greece on one occasion when she went via Sweden to raise money for the Greek Red Cross, and was longing to get back to Athens, despite the privations, as quickly as possible.
And how soon after her return did the Cohen family come to her?
Well, this was in around about October 1943, and she was living at that point in the Prince George's house opposite Damoskinos' palace. And of course there were German sentries outside Damoskinos' palace. And the Cohen family, old Mr. Cohen had died, but in 1913 he had housed the Greek royal family in Thessalonica at one point, and they'd always said, if ever we can do anything for you. Well, the Cohen family remembered this, and through a social friend of Princess Alice's, they tried to get in touch with her. But she was aware of the dangers of talking to this social friend, so she said, no, I don't want to get involved at all. But then immediately, through a rather more discreet source, she got to meet the Cohens, and she met Mrs. Cohen, and literally an hour later, Mrs. Cohen and her daughter moved into an upper floor of this house where Princess Alice was living. They had their own little kitchen, and they stayed there, and they did not go out. And she said to her staff, this is a Swiss governess that we had before, and she's in some danger, so you mustn't talk about her. And they didn't. They respected that. And knowing Princess Alice, she wouldn't have said anything more about that. She would have just left it. She wouldn't have stirred up their interest in any way at all.
The danger of betrayal being, of course, ever present.
Danger of betrayal very much present.
Tell us a little about the Cohen family.
Well, the Cohen family had known the Greek royal family and had housed them in Salonika about 1912, 1913, the time of the Balkan Wars, when they were up there, and where Princess Alice indeed was nursing, setting up field hospitals and all sorts of things. But it wasn't really her that had been specifically looked after by them, but the king at the time, and it always said, my family will always be very grateful to you for housing us. And so, of course, when the Jews were coming to Athens at this point and were in considerable danger, the widowed Mrs. Cohen had 4 sons and a daughter, and she appealed to Princess Alice to help her, but did so through a social friend. And Princess Alice said, no, I'm not interested, I don't want to get involved, because she saw the danger of the social friend talking about this. But immediately she took alternative action to find Mrs. Cohen, and they met. And within an hour, Mrs. Cohen and her daughter were installed in an upper room of the house where Princess Alice was living at the time, in Academy Road. And so they had a little kitchen up there, and Princess Alice told her very, very small staff that this was a former Swiss governess who needed a bit of help, who was in certain amount of danger from the Germans, and that they mustn't talk about her. And nor did they. And Princess Alice was quite a severe person, and you know, if she said that to you and you were working for her, you would understand that she meant you to take that very seriously. So, and also Mr. Jacques Cohen, the son, he at one point was also hiding there, but he never went out at all during the time he was there. Whereas the other brothers then were able to make their escape and join free forces and so forth and do good elsewhere. And so I suppose they were there for a few months from October 1943 through till the following spring, and no one ever discovered them. Well, every now and again, of course, a German officer would come and visit Princess Alice and make inquiries, and she was genuinely very deaf, but she was able to feign a certain sort of stupidity, and he just thought, silly old woman, she wouldn't be able to arrange anything anyway, there's obviously nothing going here. And so they just left her in peace, and that's why she got away with it. Interestingly, she never spoke about this later, and indeed Jacques Cohen, after the war, met her in Rome and said to her, I'd like to thank you very much for what you did for my family. She just brushed this aside, said it was absolutely nothing, and didn't want to talk about it, never told her family about it at all. And it was only many, many years later, long after she died, that Mr. Jacques Cohen, by then living in Paris, recommended her for the Yad Vashem Award, and so it was all investigated and looked into, and, well, as you know, in 1994, Prince Philip and his sister were able to go out to Jerusalem and accept it on her behalf.
So if it hadn't been really the desire of those who were saved to do something for their rescuer, her modesty and self-effacing nature would have simply, the story would not have become known.
It would not have become known, and I can't help wondering if she'd still been alive, whether she wouldn't have stopped them from doing it, because she wouldn't want any sort of recognition. Her attitude was, you know, you have a privileged life. Actually, it's arguable how privileged her life really was, to be honest, but that she saw it as a princess. It is your job to help people who are worse off than you are, and that's what she set about to do in life.
Well, it's a story of goodness which is very remarkable.
Yes.
I used to hear stories when I was a child, when I was tucked up in bed at night. I remember being told stories about the war. And my grandmother would also tell me remarkable stories about the kinds of sufferings that so many of you had to endure. And I know she felt it deeply. My other grandmother, my father's mother, Princess Alice of Greece, she, as I think probably you know by now, took in a Jewish family in Athens during the war and looked after them. And she never told anybody, none of her family, even, for years and years afterwards. So that's another reason, ladies and gentlemen, why I wanted to be with you today. Because I know my grandmother would have appreciated it. She was a very remarkable lady. She used to give me long lectures when I was quite small. But she, I know, will have an inkling of what is happening here this afternoon. So I'm enormously proud that a member of my family also did the right thing. Because this is the thing that always fascinates me when you ask those families and others who did take kinder transport refugees into their homes. They did it because it was the right thing to do. And that, I think, is something that we always need to remember on these occasions. What is the right thing to do? There are so many instances in our own time where people are suffering such unmentionable horrors that all of you can associate with, to say the least. And so we must never, ever forget the lessons from what you had to go through. There are object lessons there for us and for future generations.
In 1943, the Germans began to deport tens of thousands of Jews
from the northern Greek city of Salonika and that whole Greek region, the Greek provinces of Macedonia and Thrace. Several thousand were able to flee south to Athens, which, although then occupied by the Germans, was not a scene of deportation, not yet. One family, the Coen family, had been friends of the Greek royal family before the First World War, when they had in fact given refuge to the Greek royal family at the time of terrible flooding in the north of Greece. And the King of Greece had said at that time, look, if you ever have a problem, don't hesitate to come and ask me for help. The head of the Coen family had died during the war, and his widow remembered the king's offer. And so, fleeing from the north of Greece, where the deportations were taking place on a daily basis, she made her way to the home of Princess Alice of Greece, the king's daughter. Princess Alice was already doing a tremendous amount to try to help those Greeks in Athens who were desperately hungry, who were suffering tremendously under German occupation, which was in Greece a very cruel and harsh occupation. But she recognized that the Coens were in very great danger, and so she took in Mrs. Coen and her daughter and later her son, and arranged for two other sons to escape from Greece and make their way to Egypt, where they joined the Greek fighting forces, part of the Allied forces. She took these three Coens into her house in Athens. It was a terribly dangerous thing to do. In fact, she had to pretend that Mrs. Coen was a Swiss governess, that somehow they weren't Jewish, because the danger of betrayal and deportation was ever present. She hid the Coens in her palace. From time to time, German officers would come to see her. She was very much not only a princess of Greece, but of German royal descent. She had in her blood not only that of the British Queen Victoria, but of many German princes of the pre-First World War period. So the German officers would come as a matter of great respect to a Greek princess who was also of German royal blood. On one occasion, a senior German officer said to her, Princess Alice, is there anything we can do for you? Here we are, the Germans in Athens, we control everything. Is there anything we can do for you? And she looked at him with her piercing eyes and said, yes, there is something you can do for me. You can leave my country. On another occasion, the Gestapo came to the palace. They must have heard rumors that Jews were hiding there, or Jews were hiding near there, because many, many Athenians gave refuge to Jewish families, encouraged to do so by the great Archbishop of Athens, Archbishop Damaskinos. So they came to her palace, and they asked her, do you know anything of Jews hiding in this neighborhood? Princess Alice was slightly deaf, so she used the opportunity of their question to play even deafer. What? I can't hear you. What are you saying? I don't understand. Finally, they gave up and said, she's a silly old woman. Let's go elsewhere. Princess Alice never spoke about her rescue of this Jewish family, which was not only a brave but also a dangerous thing to have done. But after the war, as so often happened, those who had been saved by Christians throughout Europe were desperate to get some recognition for those who had saved them. And so Princess Alice's story became known. But she never regarded it as anything special. And when one of the Coen boys met her by chance many years after the war and started to thank her for saving his mother and his family, she brushed it off. No, it was nothing. Anybody would have done it. The truth is, not anybody would have done it. And she showed that tremendous quality of goodness without conditions. There was no question of payment. There was no question of reward. Simply the desire to do what she, as a religious person and as a human being, a decent human being, was convinced was the right thing to do to help fellow human beings in danger.